Last week, Chinese President Xi Jinping traveled to Moscow for a 3-day meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin telling Congress that the meeting sends a troubling message to the West of support between China and Russia. Joining me right now to react is the former Secretary of State. He is Fox News contributor Mike Pompeo. Secretary Pompeo, it's great to see you. Congratulations on the recent book, the New York Times bestseller, Never Give an Inch, Fighting for the America I Love.
Thank you, Maria.
Good to see you this morning.
Great to be with you this morning.
What is your assessment of this meeting between Putin and Xi Jinping?
Maria, it is very telling. It confirms what we have known for years about Xi Jinping, which is that his intent to make every nation in the world a vassal state is real, that he is serious and determined. And what you saw was a Vladimir Putin who's in trouble. He's isolated. He's isolated, frankly, because the United States and Europe have done the right thing in supporting the Ukrainian effort to fend off his unprovoked attack in Ukraine. And so he needs someone to buy his energy, even if at a deep discount. He needs someone to provide him help at the United Nations on the Security Council to fend off sanctions. All of the things that China can provide for him, Vladimir Putin has now succumbed to Xi Jinping. For America, it matters because you now have these two powers combined working against the interests of the United States of America. The fact that the Biden administration has let this happen is absolutely tragic and unnecessary. Think that the 1,000 Russian nuclear warheads are now part of the Chinese Communist Party's nuclear stockpile is one way to think about this. They'll now be working together against our and the West's nuclear programs. That's really dangerous, Maria. It's bad for every American.
It's also troubling the fact that China is trying to get all of these partnerships to use the yuan when transacting for oil business. You know, he was with the head of Saudi Arabia, and the Saudis said, yeah, maybe we will be using the yuan and not the dollar. This is the CCP's goal, to replace the dollar as the world's currency.
Yes, it absolutely is. And even more broadly, it is the CCP's goal to replace the United States as the dominant global economic power in the world. And we're letting that happen. We're letting that happen under the Biden's watch in so many ways. Think about this. Yesterday or the day before, former Secretary Kerry, who frankly is leading a large part of this administration's foreign policy, said, gosh, with China, we have to work with them because we can't get bogged down in these other issues. So climate change has now trumped American security with respect to the Chinese Communist Party. It's foolish in two ways, Maria. You know this. The chance of the Chinese Communist Party actually improving the climate of the globe is zero. And second, when you put climate change as your priority, you shut in American energy, American gas and fossil fuels. You shut in American innovation and technology, and you allow the Chinese Communist Party to do precisely what you described. They'll replace our currency. They'll replace American workers. They'll destroy jobs here at home. And we needn't let that happen. We simply need to exhibit the kind of strength that we did for 4 years in the Trump administration.
But can we actually exhibit that kind of strength now after depleting so many of our stockpiles? You heard what Ron Johnson said earlier in the show. He says we are not at the readiness place that we need to be because of the last couple of years of not only sending money and ammunition elsewhere, but also cutting back on defense.
Well, Senator Johnson has that partly right. I respect him a great deal, but we have a different view. I think it is incredibly important that we push back against what is a Chinese-Russian effort in Ukraine, right? These are deeply connected. They're not separate ideas. His point is right in that we have depleted some of our stockpiles. We need to rebuild them. This is a long time coming in the failure to reinvigorate and rebuild the American industrial base in the way that we need to. But Maria, we can absolutely do this. We have the capacity to rebuild, to rearm, to refit, to build a military that is capable of the singular task, which is deterrence. This is what we did for 4 years. We deterred the Iranians. We deterred the Russians. We deterred the Chinese Communist Party. We deterred Chairman Kim. This happens with a strong military and an industrial base prepared to support it. And I know we can get this back. It's simply a matter of will, focus, and mission.
Can we do this even with this expectation that Joe Biden is compromised? What does the CCP have on him?
Well, I couldn't answer that, and I hope these committees will get to the bottom of it. We've already started to see some of the funds transfers that came to the family, or at least what looks to be receipts for those. Regardless of that, I always look to people's actions. We try to suss out intent. For me, it's what are you doing? The Biden administration is putting all of the wrong things at the forefront of America, and you can see it unraveling. You can see it unraveling for every American family. We are less secure today than we were 2.5 years ago, Maria.
Very, very disturbing. Secretary, stay with us. I want to get your take on Iran. We have new developments this morning with regard to the potential of deeming the Iranians a terrorist organization. We'll be right back with more from former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Welcome back, and I am back with former Secretary of State and Fox News contributor Mike Pompeo. Mr. Secretary, I want to get your take on Iran. We've spoken over the months about what appears to be this Iran deal now dead in the water, but we've got news here that the U.S. conducted airstrikes in Syria after an Iranian drone killed a U.S. contractor, wounded 5 service members. And now we understand that the State Department says that it would support a decision by the United Kingdom to designate the Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard as a terrorist group. I know you spent years trying to get the EU to make this designation.
Maria, we did, and we worked to get the EU and European countries to designate the IRGC as a terrorist organization because they're a terrorist organization in the same way that the Houthis in Yemen are a terrorist organization, and this administration lifted that restriction too. We're about reality. We're about facts on the ground. I hope that everyone will come to understand that Iran is the world's largest state sponsor of terror. They're trying to kill folks in Europe. They're trying to kill folks here in America. They present real risk, as we saw to the American who was killed this week in Syria. If you don't respond with real power, with real force, they will continue to push, and they'll continue to create more risk. We know this, Maria. When you are weak, when you sit at the table with the Iranians and try to negotiate a nuclear deal that will guarantee them a nuclear weapon, your friends, Israel, the Gulf Arab states, won't stay with you. They'll hedge their bets. And your adversaries will see that you're weak, and they will continue to push. This is deterrence 101. The Biden administration has gotten a failing grade on that.
And you've put together the Abraham Accords, probably the first time in decades that we were even talking about peace in the Middle East. I know at some point you expected the Saudis to join that Abraham Accords as well. Where does that stand?
Well, it still exists. It's working well. The people in those countries know that they are better off. And most importantly, America is better off. The risk that we'll have to send more of our kids to fight and do something really difficult in that region is lower. The more you have peace, the more you have prosperity in the Middle East, the more secure America is as well. There's deep American interest in making sure that happens. And the Abraham Accords were a remarkable outcome of the United States doing hard work to make sure everybody understood that we'd be with Israel, that we would help the Arab states be successful as well, the Gulf Arab states, and that we understood Iran as the problem child in the Middle East.
All right, let's take a short break and come right back with Secretary Mike Pompeo. Stay with us. Well, welcome back, and I am back with former Secretary of State and Fox News contributor Mike Pompeo. Mr. Secretary, I want to bring you the news this morning of the administration in Africa. Kamala Harris, the vice president, has landed in Ghana, and she is expected to try to woo the leadership throughout countries in Africa away from China. Your thoughts on China's power grab in Africa and what the U.S. needs to do about it, if anything?
Maria, there's no doubt Xi Jinping is trying to control the whole world, and that includes nations in Africa, doing it 2 ways. One, buying up the rare earth minerals that this administration desperately wants for its climate change program, and second, buying up political leaders, bribing folks at every level inside of those governments in an attempt, again, to surround the United States of America, to make life difficult for our kids and grandkids here at home. So it seems a long ways when you talk about African countries. It seems far off, but make no mistake about it. It is part of a strategic effort on behalf of Xi Jinping to control the economic levers of the world. And we talked about earlier the dollar and the renminbi. This is just another example of trade relationships being used in a way that is true economic warfare against the United States of America. We know how to push back against this. America is powerful. We have friends and allies in the world that are powerful economies as well. We can't sit back and allow the Chinese to do this, and I hope Vice President Harris is successful. It won't just take words and meetings and coffee. It'll take real work, and real American power.
Well, I mean, you've seen this from so many levels, not just your years as former Secretary of State, where you were, I would say, the leader in terms of keeping China in check with all of those indictments of people who were sending information over to China. But you also saw this beginning in the CIA as well as the head of the CIA. I don't know, Secretary, I'm feeling like they're winning. The CCP is, like you always say, inside the gates of America. They're being successful in these goals.
Maria, there's no doubt they're having some success. They've got challenges, too. I'm confident we will win this. I'm very optimistic about that. But it won't be if we sit back and watch it. And for 40 years, U.S. policy was engage with China more and they'll become more like us, when in fact the opposite has happened. The good news is we reversed that. We flipped it on its head. I think American people can see now the spying that's taking place in America, their roles in our universities. We're getting there. We're gonna do it. It's gonna take real work and real American leadership.
All right, Secretary, it's good to have you this morning. We so appreciate you. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo